Picture this: a sleek business jet touches down on gravel, stones ricocheting off its belly. The engine's reverse thrust, kicking up clouds of dust as it decelerates on a runway that shouldn't exist, at least not for a jet. This same aircraft, minutes earlier, was cruising at 440 knots at 45,000 feet, matching the speed and altitude of any Citation or Learjet. In aviation, there's always been an unbreakable rule. Jets fly fast, but only from perfect runways. Rugged planes reach remote fields, but crawl through the sky. For a century, you picked one or the other: speed or access, comfort or capability. Pilatus looked at that rule and decided to shatter it. This wasn't just about building another business jet. If this failed, it would be a branding disaster that could sink billions in development costs and destroy Pilatus's reputation as precision engineers. If it succeeded, it would create an entirely new class of aircraft, one that nobody thought possible. Was this Swiss precision at its finest, or ambition that would bring down a company? Here's what they risked and how they nearly lost it all. How do you engineer a jet that lands where jets aren't supposed to go? What compromises would destroy the dream versus which ones they could live with? And could the failure of this single aircraft have meant the death of Pilatus's entire jet ambitions? For over 70 years, aviation has lived by a simple division. Jets dominated the high-speed, long-range market, but they needed pristine concrete, thousands of feet of it. Turboprops owned the rough fields, the dirt strips, the places civilization hadn't quite reached, but they flew slower, lower, louder. No one had bridged both worlds. Not Cessna, not Beechcraft, not even Boeing or Airbus had tried. Enter Pilatus, a Swiss company that had built its reputation on one legendary turboprop, the PC-12. Since the mid-90s, this single-engine workhorse had become the gold standard for reaching impossible places. Mining companies flew them to dirt strips in Africa. Air ambulances used them to evacuate patients from remote islands. Governments deployed them to airfields that existed only on paper. But PC-12 operators kept asking the same question: can you make it faster? They loved the versatility, the massive cargo door, the ability to land almost anywhere. But in an age where time equals money, that turboprop cruise speed was starting to feel antiquated. They wanted jet speed without sacrificing capability. Think about it. You're a medevac operator. Every minute counts when transporting a critical patient, but the nearest suitable airport is a short gravel strip. A jet can't land there. A turboprop can, but it'll take an extra hour to reach the trauma center. Lives hang in that gap. Could Pilatus really build a jet that retains the PC-12's go-anywhere capability and add genuine jet performance? Pilatus didn't just survey their customers, they embedded themselves in their operations. Engineers rode along on medevac flights to remote Canadian settlements. They watched mining executives land on dirt strips in Australia. They studied government operations in Alaska, where the runway might be a frozen river. The data was staggering. Operators needed to reach thousands of locations worldwide that conventional jets couldn't touch. Places where the runway was grass, dirt, gravel, or coral, where obstacles surrounded the approach, where the strip was so short that most pilots wouldn't attempt it in a trainer, let alone a jet. Pilatus gave their vision a name: the Super Versatile Jet, or SVJ. Not just marketing speak, this would be their North Star through development. Every decision would be measured against this standard. Does it make the aircraft more versatile without destroying its jet performance? Here's where it gets even crazier. The skeptics came out immediately. Competitors whispered that Pilatus was chasing a fantasy. They said it couldn't be done. Too many compromises, the critics warned. You'll end up with something that does nothing well. The short field performance would cripple cruise speed. The reinforced landing gear would add too much weight. The wing design needed for slow flight would create too much drag at altitude. Even within Pilatus, doubts emerged. The development costs were astronomical, hundreds of millions for a company that had never built a jet. One senior engineer reportedly said in an early meeting, "We're either about to revolutionize business aviation or destroy our company trying." But the Swiss don't give up easily. Which compromises would they accept, and which would they refuse? The wing became the first battleground. Conventional wisdom said you couldn't optimize for both slow approach speeds and fast cruise speeds. Pilatus engineers spent years in wind tunnels, testing dozens of configurations. The solution revolution, a wing with double-slotted flaps that essentially transformed its shape between phases of flight. Retracted, it sliced through thin air at altitude. Extended, it became a lifting body that could fly slower than many single-engine trainers. But wings were just the beginning. The landing gear had to be a contradiction, strong enough to handle repeated punishment on unpaved surfaces, yet light enough not to destroy performance. Pilatus developed a unique trailing link design that could absorb impacts that would snap conventional gear. They tested it by deliberately slamming prototypes onto gravel strips at angles that made test pilots sweat. The engines presented another paradox. Mount them low for easy maintenance and you risk foreign object damage from loose stones. Mount them high and you compromise the aircraft's center of gravity. Williams International modified their engines specifically for Pilatus, a quiet revolution hidden beneath polished nacelles, special intake geometry that deflected debris, reinforced components, software that could detect and compensate for damage in real time. Then came the cargo door, a massive opening on the side of the fuselage unlike anything fitted to a business jet. Competitors called it insane. Why compromise the pressure vessel for cargo capability? But Pilatus knew their customers. They'd watched PC-12 operators load everything from medical equipment to mining samples. The door stayed. Certification became a multi-year nightmare. Aviation authorities had no framework for what Pilatus was attempting. How do you certify a jet for unpaved operations when no jet had ever been certified for that? Pilatus had to write new test procedures, create new safety standards, prove that every system could handle conditions no jet had faced before. Watch the certification videos and you'll see the PC-24 prototype being tortured in ways that would ground any other business jet. But did the trade-offs break speed, range, or reliability? Or was every gamble calculated? Spring in the Swiss Alps, the entire Pilatus workforce gathered on the tarmac. 3 prototypes had been built, but only one would fly today. Test pilots ran through final checks as morning mist lifted from the mountains. The PC-24 rotated off the runway for the first time. Less than an hour later, it touched down to thunderous applause. But this was just the beginning of a grueling test campaign that would push the aircraft beyond anything attempted before. Early tests revealed problems nobody had anticipated. Landing on grass strips, the nose wheel threw debris in unexpected patterns. On gravel runways, stones became embedded in tire treads, then flew out at altitude. The steep approach capability, marketed as a key feature, nearly became a deal breaker. At extreme angles, traditional flight controls became unpredictable. Solutions emerged through obsessive iteration. Redesigned wheel fairings, specialized tire compounds, completely rewritten flight control software. Each fix brought them closer to the impossible. Here's what really matters. Pilatus flew a PC-24 to Courchevel, France, home to one of the world's most challenging airports. The runway is insanely short, with a massive gradient. No jet had ever landed there. The PC-24 didn't just land. It took off again with room to spare. Aviation Week called it a watershed moment. But the real test came when they delivered the first aircraft to launch customer, as they prayed that real-world operations would validate the promises and not expose fatal flaws. PlaneSense, a fractional operator based in New Hampshire, took delivery of the first production PC-24. Their initial mission, flying executives to a private grass strip in Martha's Vineyard that their entire jet fleet couldn't access. The PC-24 landed without drama, taxied on grass that would bog down most aircraft, and departed an hour later. Just another day at the office. The Royal Flying Doctor Service of Australia became the PC-24's most dramatic advocate. They needed to reach Indigenous communities where the airport might be a dirt road scraped flat by a bulldozer. Their first PC-24 medevac mission flew to a strip that hadn't seen a jet in its entire existence. The patient loaded through that massive cargo door. 30 minutes later, they were at altitude, racing towards Sydney at jet speeds. The numbers tell the story. Cruise speed matching light jets costing millions more, ranged across continents, takeoff distance shorter than most turboprops, landing capability that opens up tens of thousands of airports worldwide versus just a few thousand for conventional jets, cabin volume larger than jets, twice its price. Pilatus hasn't stood still. Recent upgrades increased payload capacity, advanced avionics added synthetic vision. Interior configurations now range from executive luxury to pure cargo hauling. One One operator configured theirs with a conference table that converts to a medical stretcher. The PC-24 could be aviation's most daring success story, proving that breaking century-old rules isn't just possible, it's profitable. Or it might be remembered as the jet that carved out a niche too specific to revolutionize anything. Years into service, the jury's still deliberating. This was not a fluke. It was deliberate, calculated, and executed with the patience only a private company could maintain. Pilatus spent years and hundreds of millions to prove everyone wrong. But in the unforgiving world of aviation, nothing is guaranteed. Will other manufacturers follow Pilatus's lead? Will the PC-24 inspire a new category of super versatile jets, or will it remain a brilliant anomaly? Click here to check out another video.